Bills. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Income Tax Amendment Number 2.
Income Tax Amendment Number 2.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order Number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order Number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Income Tax Amendment Number 2. Income Tax Amendment Number 2 bill. The bill for consideration, Madam President, is the Income Tax Amendment Number 2 bill. The purpose of the bill is to amend the Income Tax Act, Cap 1502. Clauses 1 and 2 of the bill provides the short title and interpretation of the bill. Clause 3 of the bill amends Section 32, Accessible Income Generally of the Principal Act, to ensure that an international business company that was incorporated prior to the first day of January 2019 and elected to pay 1% income tax continues to be liable to pay income tax under the Income Tax Act, Cap 1502, with respect to its worldwide income. The amendment to Section 32 of the Act is deemed to have come into force from the 12th day of December 2018.
Senators, the question is that the Income Tax Amendment Number 2 bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Income Tax Act, Cap 15.02.
We'll take it by clauses. Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 32.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Income Tax Amendment Number 2 bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and pass.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Income Tax Amendment Number 2 bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government
Be it
Business.
enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2019.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled International Business Companies Amendment Number 2.
International Business Companies Amendment Number 2.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading of a bill entitled International Business Companies Amendment Number 2. The bill for consideration is the International Business Companies Amendment Number 2 bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to amend the International Business Companies Act, Cap 12, 14, the Act. Clauses 1 and 2 of the bill provide for the short title and interpretation. Clause 3 of the bill amends Section 5A5 of the Act, companies registered from the first day of January 2019, to clarify that Section 84, continuation applies to an international business company registered from the first day of January 2019. Section 5A is also amended to insert a correct reference to subsection 2 of Section 113A of the Act, concessions for a head office, to provide that a head office company cannot elect under Section 1091B to be liable to income tax on the chargeable income of the head office company at a rate of 1%. Therefore, a head office company incorporated from the first day of January 2019 shall file an annual tax return based on its audited financial statements. The Act is amended by Clause 4 of the bill through the insertion of a new Section 5B to allow an international business company registered prior to the first day of January 2019 to be liable to pay income tax as a resident under the Income Tax Act, Cap 1502. Where an international business company is liable to pay income tax as a resident under the Income Tax Act, Cap 1502, Section 5A of the Act, companies registered from the first day January 2019 applies, and that international business company is required to file a notice to pay income tax as a resident and an amended memorandum of association to the Registrar of International Business Companies.
Senators, the question is that the International Business Companies Amendment Number 2 bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the International Business Companies Act, Cap 12.14.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 5A.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Insertion of new section 5B.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the International Business Companies Amendment Number 2 bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and pass.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and the International Business Companies Amendment Number 2 bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the International Business Companies Amendment Number 2 Act 2019.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled St. Lucia National Economic Fund.
St. Lucia National Economic Fund.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading a bill shortly entitled St. Lucia National Economic Fund. The bill for consideration is the St. Lucia National Economic Fund Bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to establish the St. Lucia National Economic Fund. Preliminary matters are provided for in clauses 1 and 2 of the bill, which make provision for the short title and interpretation. The St. Lucia National Economic Fund, the fund is provided for in Part 1 of the bill. The fund is established under Clause 3 of the bill. The functions of the fund are contained in Clause 4 of the bill, and the monies of the fund are provided for in Clause 5 of the bill. The fund is governed by the St. Lucia National Economic Fund Board, the board, as specified under Clause 6 of the bill. The term of appointment of a member of the board is provided in Clause 7 of the bill. Clauses 8, 9, and 10 of the bill provide for meetings of the board, disclosure of interest by a member of the board, and regulation of proceedings of the board. The remuneration of members of the board is provided for in Clause 11 of the bill. Part 2 of the bill makes provision for loans and investments from the fund in Clauses 12 and 13 of the bill. The finance of the fund is provided for in Part 3 of the bill. The financial year of the fund is stipulated in Clause 14 of the bill. The board must prepare a budget and plan of action of the fund under Clause 15 of the bill, keep proper records of accounts under Clause 16 of the bill, and appoint an independent auditor under Clause 17 of the bill. The independent auditor must submit an auditor's report under Clause 18 of the bill. Clause 19 of the bill requires the submission by the board of an annual report to the Minister responsible for finance. Under Part 4 of the bill, Section 33 of the Citizenship by Investment Act, number 14 of 2015, is replaced under Clause 20 of the bill, and the Minister responsible for finance is empowered to make regulations to give effect to the bill under Clause 21 of the bill.
Senators, the question is that the St. Lucia National Economic Fund be read a second time. Senator Henry.
Thank you, Madam President. Be extremely brief, just to ask a few questions, recognizing that much was said at the lower house with regards to this bill. I personally have had some reflections in terms of this bill and what, in my mind, it purports or it wants to do, or it may want to do, and I need to be clear on it. Especially when, Madam President, Section 4 of the bill speaks to the function of the bill. 1, to advance loan for government-approved capital projects, so that one in particular. And the bill in Part 2, Loan and Investment, 12(1) says a person may make an application to the board for a loan from the fund for the government-approved capital project. So here's the question I would like to ask, Madam President. Is this fund intended to create an environment for contractors who ordinarily would qualify to implement a government project but is unable to go to the bank, can now submit design, finance, and build contract because they have access to this economic fund? Because one, the loan is tied to a government project. And it says a person. So I take it that the intention is that this fund is open to the general public. But it is a person who is going to implement a government capital project. And therefore, is this the intention? Is to allow contractors who ordinarily would not be able to go to the commercial banks to get finance for a capital project? Is this what this is about? And I am really concerned about this, because if this is the intention, Madam President, we have our commercial banks, we have the development bank, where persons can go to the bank to finance a project. And if you're in the business of construction and you're not into concession contracts, you're not into the kind of contractor who could provide finance, is this where this is going? Madam President, the questions that were asked also with regards to the composition of the board. When I look at what is possible to happen under this bill, and there are mainly civil servants whose boss really is the Minister of Finance. How can we ensure accountability and transparency in that kind of environment? So the question, apart from everything that has been raised with regards to setting up the economic fund, I am particularly concerned about a person getting a loan from the economic fund, but is to implement a capital project, a government capital project. And a government capital project can either be an economic project, which is a road, a social project, which is a school, a health center, or something relating to government. And I'm asking, why would a person have to come to the economic fund, to the government for a loan, to do a project for the government? That's my question. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Gideon.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to just share my thoughts on the bill at hand, which is the St. Lucia National Economic Fund bill, which of course is tied very close to CIP of St. Lucia. Madam President, after reading this bill, and of course hearing it from the leader of government business, and of course the comments made by the leader of the opposition business, it begs to ask whether this bill was carefully read before coming to the House. Now, on the matter of the CIP in connection with the National Economic Fund, we have the Prime Minister almost wanting to chastise a member of the opposition in the lower house, talking about how there were lies and misrepresentations of what he said. But if one should ask the question, Madam Speaker, Madam President, what really was done with the funds of 2017, 2018, what was done with these funds? We have in the estimates a page that just talks about the revenue of the CIP, and that was it. Just a reference, and it went silent. Yet still we hear that what was done with these monies were listed. A sheet was provided, but we were talking about estimates of 2019, 2020. So if anything, we were talking about possible monies received and what it would be used for, and not what was before. So with the setting of the economic fund, we have majority of the monies of the CIP being stored in there. And it is said for projects and capital projects and so on of the country. But can we name one project that has been done with the CIP funds? Can one project be named? Because what was written was just an amount of money, and it says the CIP revenue, the balance, a portion of the money, 300 and something million, where there was an estimate of 600 and so on received. So what about the balance? Where is the balance? What is there for? So coming in and beating, talking, it is not in writing. There was nothing in writing to suggest, to say, well, okay, we built this school over there, or we repaired this home over there, or this road over there was built with CIP funds, or there were 6 houses being built on this plot of land from the CIP funds. Nothing. So this is my concern. What was done previously? We need to know what was done with the CIP monies previously. What was it spent on? And in terms of the economic fund, the board, it seems to me, after reading, with the term minister, activities of the board has to be sanctioned by the minister. I mean, the minister, you put a board, you have no confidence in the board. You have to have the final say, the minister. Minister must receive this, minister must give the okay. For example, you have, in terms of the loan aspect, in part 2, when it says a person may make an application to the board for a loan from the funds for a government-approved capital project, for a government-approved capital project. So, as my colleague said, it seems that this fund will become or serve the purposes of the banks. That's what it's going to be, governments, banks, and they give to whomever they desire, because on the area where it says disclosure of interest, and where the board meets, they scrutinize, they have to report to the minister. So the minister could say, okay, let's give him the loan and so on. So I think that the whole CIP board arrangement that is presently existing in St. Lucia, with this economic fund, the CIP board will have next to nothing to say in terms of the monies, the usage of the monies. Whereas in other Caribbean islands, we have persons coming out, you have ministers coming out in charge of the CIP would say to you, hey, this is what we are going to build from the CIP funds. 2 years, 2017, 2018, nothing in St. Lucia. Nothing. And to me, monies have been collected. What are these monies used for? What are they used for? So, with my little input, these are my concerns. Is it going to be a situation where capital projects are put out by government, I apply, who knows, maybe for some reason they may not like my head, I get through, decide I don't have the money, let me go to the government's bank. Let me go to the government's bank, apply. They approve me for the capital project. I'm applying to get monies for it. Yes, then I could be denied. So why approve me in the first place for the capital project? Why approve me, Madam President, in the first place for the capital project? If you're going to refuse me when I apply for the loan, because maybe the banks have refused me, and I decide, okay, I'm going to the economic fund. I'm going to apply for a loan to undertake government's capital project, which of course I may not know, I don't know what is the government capital project. There's no list to say, well, it is the building of a school, or it is a repair to a road network or whatever. There's nothing like this. Capital project, government's capital project, the person can apply for a loan from the fund. And if it is the minister with the board can sign on and say, okay, let's give it to him with the necessary conditions or whatever. What is this? What is it? So now I can safely say, well, government is going to give me a loan to do its own work for it. Government is giving me a loan to do its work for it. So it's just like if you, Madam President, you have a job at your home. You chose me, or I chose to come to you to get the job. I have no money to do it. You tell me, okay, I'll give you the money. I will give you the money to do the job for me. So I think that this document, it has its flaws. I think it should be reconsidered. It should be reorganized. Come back to the House or to the Senate with something better, something that is clearer, something that is feasible. And let us see how we could work. Let's see how we could work to get it. But I'm still confused about this whole idea of I can apply for a loan to the board to do government's work. I'm still at a loss. I don't know what it really that stands for, what comes out of that. So I'd be happy if those on the opposite side would explain and at the same time tell us what was done with the CIP monies from 2017, 2018, up to this present point that we are. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Francis. Senator.
Thanks, Madam. Madam President, I rise to add my voice to the debate on this bill. But before I delve into the areas of concern, I shall preface my contribution, Madam President, by reading a few sections of the CIP Act number 14 of 2015. Madam President, at clause 33 of the Act, it states that St. Lucia National Economic Fund
1, the St. Lucia National Economic Fund is established. 2, qualifying investments of cash shall be paid into the St. Lucia National Economic Fund. And 3, the Minister for Finance shall lay before Parliament every financial year for its approval the purposes to which funds will be allocated. The purposes for which funds will be allocated. Madam President, this is my third year in the House of Assembly, and I recall viewing one report in relation to CIP, and that report was historic in nature. So therefore, Madam President, the critical question is if the CIP Act requires that approval be provided by Parliament before funds from the Economic Fund are being expended, you know, one needs to understand why wasn't it done? And also, Madam President, when I look at Clause 40 of the said Act says, subject to approval by Cabinet, the Minister may make regulations for the purposes of giving effect to the provisions of this Act. And that's 41, Clause 41. Clause 42 says, without prejudice to the generality of subsection 1, the Minister may make regulations in respect of A, qualifications, general requirements and procedures for CIP by investment, B, requirements for St. Lucia National Economic Fund investment, and C, requirements for an investment in land or enterprise. There are other subclauses, Madam President, but for the purpose of my presentation, I think I want to stop here. Madam President, my understanding is that regulations can be established to give effect to Clause 33. I do not believe that the intent was for Section 3 of Clause 43, which is the requirement for Parliament to approve projects that are undertaken from the fund. I do not believe that we need to get that nullified. That's not my understanding, and if I'm mistaken, then I need some explanation there. The regulations, yes, but I believe there is still a requirement for compliance with Clause 33 of the Act. Madam President, be that as it may, I have taken some time to peruse the Act carefully, and on page 6, Section 4, on the functions of the fund, it states that for 1, the functions of the fund are A, to advance loans for a government-approved capital project, B, to provide investment for a government-approved capital project, C, to reduce government debt, D, to purchase government bonds, and E, to provide monies for a purpose approved by Cabinet that is not considered recurrent in nature. Madam President, I don't have any issue with clauses 4, 1, C, and D, and possibly not E, but I have a concern with A and B. To advance loans for a government-approved capital project. Madam President, I do not comprehend why government would want to get into the business of lending money. Lending money requires certain skills, requires certain expertise, requires special structures, systems, procedures to ensure that it is done effectively and that risks associated with lending are mitigated. We need expertise that will be able to understand lending considerations. How do you screen somebody to ensure that you are lending money to the right person? Somebody with credit worthiness? How is the screening going to get done? Madam President, the Act speaks to a board and the Act spells out who the board members will be and Cabinet's involvement in the whole process of lending money and providing approvals and support and what have you. But Madam President, lending money is not as simple as that. You need a system, you need a structure, you need procedures, you need personnel, you need experts to be able to get it right. When we're talking about lending considerations, we're talking about screening to make sure there's the ability to repay, screening to make sure that the character of the individual who's going to borrow the money is sound, such that the funds could be repaid. There's the other consideration of ensuring that there is security. So in the event of default, that there is something to fall back on. Administering security, executing security, taking security, determining what type of security to take needs special expertise to be able to do that properly. When there is default, what happens? The Act does not tell us about these things. There is a section of the Act which says, and that is in section Part 2 on the loans and investment, section 5A, it says the board may, after consultation with Cabinet, grant a loan on terms and conditions as to interest, payment, security, or otherwise, including the conditions that the loan amount must be utilized for the government-approved capital project. Who's going to do that? Who's going to set the interest rate? What criteria will be used to determine what rate of interest to charge? Government is getting into a business to compete with the banks, and I don't think that's necessary, Madam President. To me, the simple thing that should happen is for the government to place the funds at the development bank or at one or two of the local banks where there is expertise to be able to do the analysis, the critical analysis using prudential expertise to make sure that the associated risk with lending is mitigated. I believe this is where that should reside, and government can spell out what it is the bank should be given priority in terms of if it's capital projects. The government can spell that out. The government can, in collaboration with the bank, determine what the lending limits should be. Government can even get into a communication to determine, okay, in terms of interest rates, whether the rates should be soft or otherwise. But I do not think that government should venture into trying to lend money, because based on my experience, Madam President, lending money is not as easy as it seems. This is going to create complications for government. It is going to create unnecessary risk for the country. We are talking about establishing a complete unit with a cadre of professionals to make sure we get it right, because the board is one thing, but who's going to ensure that the whole process of lending and everything else that goes with it happens well and is administered well? Now, Madam President, there are acts that govern the affairs of banks, that govern the affairs of credit unions, that govern the affairs of finance companies. Which act is going to govern this? Which act is going to govern this? We need to understand that. Who's going to regulate what happens there? Which act is going to regulate what goes on there? Because, you know, financial sector, banking sector is regulated. Madam President, recently we sat here in a forum with FIA and other institutions, quasi-government institutions, charged with the responsibility of making sure that we are compliant on the money laundering and terrorist financing and what have you. When you grant a loan, Madam President, yes, we know the source is coming from CIP to grant that loan. At the time when repayment is being made, how do you establish the source of the loan? It therefore means that the Money Laundering Act that governs the affairs of the banks, to ensure that there is no money laundering, will have to apply to this. Then you need another set of expertise to make sure that there's due diligence, that the know your customer regulations are being applied, because guess what, if it doesn't happen properly, it can affect our relationship with the authorities that have prescribed that we need to comply fully with global laws relating to money laundering and terrorist funding. There's a lot associated with this, Madam President. I do not want to take a lot of time, but I'm trying to make the point that I do not believe that is the way to go. This is too complicated, this is too cumbersome, this is going to put government in trouble, and it's going to be very, very costly for the country if we don't get it right. I think the simple matter is place the money with the local banks, place the funds with Development Bank, and set out the criteria under which you want the funds to be lent. I think this is very simple, and it's going to make life easy for everybody involved. Madam President, the other aspect of the Act functions of the Fund 4.1b to provide investment for a government-approved capital project. How do we define a capital-approved project? What type of projects are we talking about? It is not clear, and a lot of the requirements rest with the board in consultation with Cabinet, but it is not clear. It's not clear at all as to what is defined as as capital project. Madam President, on the loans and investment section, clause 5B, it says the board may, after consultation with Cabinet, grant a loan with a precondition to the disbursement of the loan that the person must first invest in the project a minimum percentage of the total development cost of the government approved capital project. How much is that minimum? What will that be? Who will determine what that minimum is? We are not sure. Under finance, part 3, finance, clause 17, 1, the board shall, with the approval of the minister, within 1 month after end of each financial year, appoint an independent auditor. Why do we need an independent auditor? Don't we have an auditor general, or director of audit, sorry, a director of audit? And if we have a director of audit with no teeth, I think we need to give teeth as opposed to creating new structures. New structures are costly, like I said, Madam President. Why do we need a new structure? Annual report, section 19(2), 1, 2, 3, 4 speaks to various reports that have to be presented. No later than 3 months after the end of each financial year, the board shall submit to the minister an annual report on the monies and business of the fund for that financial year, and the minister shall no later than 3 months after the submission of the annual report lay the report in Parliament. I believe, Madam President, among the reports that have to be tabled, if this bill goes through, is an age arrears report, because there are a number of reports that have to be produced, but none of them speak to arrears. If there is default, I believe Parliament needs to know that there's default, and who are the defaulters, and what action has been taken or will be taken to recover the funds. And that would speak to whether there is security and there's no security, and if there is security, what action will be taken to recover the security if this bill goes through. But Madam President, I can tell you in its current form, I think this is fraught with danger. So I can say upfront, as of now, that I am sorry, in the current form I cannot support this bill. I believe government needs to go back to the drawing board and revisit this to avoid unnecessary issues and unnecessary risk for the country. I thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just going to try to shed a little light on this topic, Madam President. I will not purport to know everything there is to know about it. But let me make it known that the whole idea of establishing the St. Lucia National Economic Fund arose out of a requirement of the Citizen by Investment Act number 14 of 2015. Now, if you notice, that is the act that established the St. Lucia National Economic Fund. There is a requirement under that act for the Minister of Finance to lay before Parliament every financial year for its approval the purpose to which the fund will be allocated. So the purpose for the fund to which the fund will be allocated, and for the making of regulations by the minister for the investment to be made to that fund. It also appeared that since the enactment of the act, the purpose of the fund was not expressed and the regulations were not, although regulations have been made to specify the amount of investment that must be paid into the fund. That fund is administered by the CIP Act of 2015, which predates my administration. But at the time, the fund was not set up. Therefore, all the monies collected were going into the consolidated fund, because the fund under the Act had not been set up. It was not yet established. So this is to establish that fund so that as of now, we will know exactly where those monies are going, and the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, the Minister for Finance, is required to report based on the legislation that governs that fund. But it is all spelled out in the CIP Act, who administers the fund, where the funds are supposed to go, and so on and so forth. Madam President, a senator on the other side actually acknowledges the existence of the fund by asking where was the money collected going. So it is good that we at least acknowledge the fund, the Citizen by Investment Act required that fund to be set up. At least I think both sides understand that, and it is in the Act. So this is just going through a process. We are taking the legislation one step further to establish the fund so that we can account. There is more transparency, because when it goes in the consolidated fund, it is lost. Similar to everything else, and as a public officer, Madam President, I am aware of that. And I give you an example of where the funds get lost again. In the government supply warehouse, the funds go into the consolidated fund. All the money that generated the revenue from selling flour, sugar, and rice, it goes into the consolidated fund. And whenever government need money to replenish those supplies, they cannot really account in terms of exactly where, because the funds are used for everything when it is in the consolidated fund. It's not assigned or allocated to a specific project, task, or program. So it is better if we can establish these funds, especially if the legislation requires it, so that there can be more transparency and accountability. And I believe, Madam President, this is what this act, this bill, this is what the St. Lucia National Economic Fund bill is all about. It's just to establish the fund, which is required under the CIP Act. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the St. Lucia National Economic Fund bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. Madam Clerk.
Senator Fortuna Belrose, how do you vote? Senator Gideon Ferdinand, how do you vote? No. Senator Jerome Gideon, how do you vote? No. Senator Joachim Henry, how do you vote? No. Senator Mary Isaac, how do you vote? Yes. Senator Francisco Japierre, how do you vote? Senator Timothy Mangal, how do you vote? Yes. Senator Mauricia Thomas Francis. Honorable Janine Jurodi McIntyre, casting vote.
Aye. The record on division is 5 aye, 4 no.
An act to establish the St. Lucia National Economic Fund and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Part 1, clauses 3 to 11.
St. Lucia National Economic Fund.
Part 1, clauses 3 to 11 stand part of the bill. Part 2, clauses 12 to 13.
Loans and investments.
Part 2, clauses 12 to 13 stand part of the bill. Part 3, clauses 14 to 19.
Finance.
Part 3, clauses 14 to 19 stand part of the bill. Part 4, clauses 20 to 21.
Miscellaneous.
Part 4, clauses 20 to 21 stand part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the St. Lucia National Economic Fund bill went through the committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the St. Lucia National Economic Fund bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the St. Lucia National Economic Fund Act 2019.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for the first reading a bill shortly entitled Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters.
Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for second reading. Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading a bill shortly entitled Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters. Madam President, this bill, the bill for consideration is the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters, Bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to give effect to and provide for the implementation of the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters, the treaty. Clauses 1 and 2 of the bill provide for the short title and interpretation. Clause 3 of the bill gives the treaty the force of law. Under Clause 4 of the bill, the minister responsible for Caribbean Community Affairs may designate a central authority that has the responsibility and power to execute requests for legal assistance. The minister responsible for Caribbean Community Affairs is given the power under Clause 5 of the bill to make amendments to the schedule to the bill. Clause 6 of the bill gives the minister responsibility for Caribbean Community Affairs the power to make regulations to give effect to the bill. The schedule to the bill contains the text of the treaty.
Senators, the question is that the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to give effect to and provide for the implementation of the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Force of law.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Designation of central authority.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Amendment of schedule.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Regulations.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 1. Schedule 1. I just want me to see what. Schedule.
Section 2, Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters Act 2019.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Public Health Amendment.
Public Health Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading a bill shortly entitled Public Health Amendment. The bill for consideration is the Public Health Amendment Bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to amend the Public Health Act, Cap 1101, the Act. Clauses 1 and 2 of the bill provide for the short title and interpretation, respectively. Clause 3 of the bill amends Section 2 of the Act to delete the definition of the words Public Health Inspector and to insert definitions for the words Environmental Health Officer, Public Health Hazard, and Public Officer. A new Section 2A is included in the Act by Clause 4 of the bill to ensure that the obligations under the Act extend to and bind the Crown. Clause 6 of the bill amends Section 5 of the Act to enable members of the Public Health Board, the board, to be remunerated for their services and to authorize the minister to publish in the Gazette the names of persons who have been appointed as members of the board. Sections 7 and 8 of the Act are amended in clauses 7 and 8 of the bill, respectively, to substitute the term Environmental Health Officer for the term Public Health Inspector. Clause 9 of the bill amends Section 9 of the Act to stipulate additional regulations to be made by the minister. Section 11 of the Act is amended in Clause 10 of the bill to give officers powers, including the ability to request information, seize or take samples of substances, and take photographs and videotapes when they have entered premises. Clause 11 of the bill amends Section 15 of the Act to increase the penalties to be imposed for contravention of the Act from $250 EC to $50,000 and from $25 to $500, and to increase the term of imprisonment from 3 months to 6 years. Clause 12 of the bill amends the Act to insert new provisions relating to the use of force and to authorize the minister to amend the schedule to the Act by an order to be published in the Gazette. Madam President, this bill is very dear to my heart. I know that my staff, they have waited many long years to implement those amendments. While they may seem small, they make a big difference in the work that the workers at the Ministry of Health, Environmental Health specifically, have to undertake. The purpose of the Public Health Amendment, Madam President, is to amend the already existing Public Health Act and to make those minor amendments for consistency and existing practice in other legislation. The same definitions used in the Act are being changed, and new definitions are added to the Act. Consequently, the term Public Health Inspector is substituted with the term Environmental Health Officer, which is currently used in the Ministry of Health. In keeping with the new terminology, several sections of the Act are amended to revert to the use of Environmental Health Officer. A definition is added to the Act for public health hazard, as this is the more modernized term used to describe various forms of threats to public health. The definition of public officer that is used in the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 101, is also adopted for purposes of this Act. The new provision is added to the Act to ensure that all government ministries and departments must comply with the provisions in the Act. Therefore, the Act binds the Crown. The Act is amended to clarify that one of the functions of the Minister of Health is to prevent, treat, limit, and suppress diseases or a public health hazard through the conduct of, for example, investigations and inquiries to determine if there is a risk to human health. The terms of the Public Health Board that is established under the Act, Madam President, the bill provides for the payment of remuneration, fees or allowances to the board, and for the publication of the names of the members of the board as first constituted and whenever there is a change in the membership of the board. That was no longer being done, and we are just now complying with the legislation. Although the Act currently provides the Minister of Health with the ability to make regulations, the Act is amended for the making of regulations for a beauty and wellness center, a spa, a massage parlor, and a body art facility. Regulations may also be made by the Minister as a result of the amendment for the control and destruction of mosquitoes and other insects, rodents and other vectors capable of transmitting or causing diseases, or a public hazard for the prevention and control of a public health hazard, and in relation to a vaccination and inoculation, air and soil pollution, the collection and publication of epidemiological and other data pertaining to public health, an occupational disease and employment health hazard, and fees in respect of an examination, a certificate, a license, or other matter under the Act. The amendment also permits the minister to make regulations to prohibit or restrict smoke from tobacco, and tobacco products, and to prohibit the sale of tobacco and tobacco products to and by minors and in and around certain facilities. A power of entry is presently provided to the Chief Medical Officer, CMO, a Medical Officer of Health, and the Minister or a person authorized under the Act. This power is strengthened as the Act is amended to enable these persons to request substances for testing or analysis, seize and take samples and request information and documents. In addition, officers may take photographs or videotapes of premises, bring machinery on premises, and use machinery on the premises under specific conditions. The penalty imposed for various offenses, as you heard under the Act, have been increased as a result of the amendment to the Act. Offenses which attract a fine of $250 have been increased to $5,000, and terms of imprisonment for 3 months are increased to 6 years. Similarly, fines of $25 are now $500. Let us hope that these are real deterrents that's going to work. 2 new provisions are added to the Act, Madam President. A use of force provision is inserted in the Act to enable an authorized person to use force that is reasonably necessary to carry out the duties assigned to these persons under the Act. The other amendment allows the Minister to amend the schedule, which contains the provisions relating to the Public Health Board, by an order published in the Gazette, Madam President.
Honorable Minister, the fee of $250 has been raised to $5,000 or $50,000. You said $5,000, and I'm reading here $50,000.
What do you have? 5,000, Madam President. Yes.
Clause 10. Look at clause 10, please. Page 2.
Yeah, that's what it says. 50,000. Is it 50,000? 50,000, sorry. The legislation says 50,000.
You submitted 5,000, so would you like to submit 50,000 instead and correct the record?
Yes, please, Madam President.
Could you repeat, since they have to transcribe it? Could you repeat the correct amount, since they have to transcribe it?
The amount written on the bill, Madam President, is 50,000, from 250 to 50,000, and from 25 to 500. It does seem a bit steep, but that is what is there.
So you correct what you said earlier?
Yes, yes, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Public Health Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Henry.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, briefly, of course, any issue with public health and to strengthen our public health environment must be welcomed. But of course, there are some areas of question, a few questions that I have. One, dealing with Section 9. The Principal Act is amended in subsection 1 in paragraph A by inserting immediately after the word business, the words a beauty and wellness center, spa, massage parlor, body art facility. Trying to understand the context of these businesses being outlined there. I would like to know, is it areas of intervention, or is this part of the office of the public health officer? If you could comment on these areas. And of course, the areas of penalties, this seem not like a deterrent, and I would like to know who are generally the persons involved in interacting and violating public health issues that we are moving the penalty from $250 to $50,000. I know we do have public health issues in St. Lucia, especially in poor communities where persons either do not have the septic tank in the right location. Generally, I know a lot of these public health issues. I know also we have public health issues relating to contractors not covering the truck or when they're going around disposing of garbage. And a host of, I mean, a lot comes to mind, Madam President, when we speak of public health issues. But in my own experience and being at planning for some time, by far, in a big way, you find poor persons always reporting issues relating to public health. Is it the understanding that if a poor person is found guilty of violating some planning regulations and it's contributing some public health hazard as it relates to the location of the soakaway or the septic tank, that we would charge that person $50,000, which might be an amount in excess of their home, or for worse, that somebody can be imprisoned up to 6 years for violation of public health, which is probably more than some of the more grievous crime that people do commit. I've heard some persons go in for doing more and being penalized with less time. So I just want to get a sense as to what this is, where this thing is about. Are we saying the right thing? Is it something that needs to be amended? And is it really capturing the environment of the persons that is going to the people who are likely to be in violation of this thing? Who exactly? Who are we targeting to put in an amount of $50,000 for violation?
Senator Francis.
Thanks, Madam President. Madam President, briefly, of course, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation, so anything, any proposal, any submission to enhance the health of the country, I am all in support. Madam President, through you, I just want to ask the Leader of Government Business, I'm not sure if I missed it, it's probably there. Noise pollution. Right now we have an issue with noise pollution with motorcycles racing at all odd times of the night in the towns, villages, and communities. Madam President, I have met visitors on several occasions who tell me they are occupying Airbnb properties on the island and they cannot sleep in peace because of the level of noise from motorcycles that are trafficking all night long. So I'm not sure, like I said, Madam President, whether I missed it, but I think noise pollution from motorcycles specifically or other vehicles that have exhaust issues, if you like, should be considered when we're looking at the health of the nation. So if it isn't there, I believe this is one that needs to be considered. Thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to clarify a few issues. Of course, this is an amendment, so everything is not spelled out. It's just amending certain sections. But a response to Senator Thomas's query about noise pollution, if you look at amendment of Section 2, Section 3, in this amendment, you will see that it mentions public health hazard to mean, and if you go to D, free C, D, radiation, noise, vibration, or heat, all of these are considered to be public noises. Also, we also have 9B, a public health hazard, and so on. So that is taken into consideration. I also want to say that if we look at amendment of section 15, section 11C, I, it says we are correct in terms of our interpretation of the the increase from $250 to $50,000. It's actually spelled out here. And I just want to say that, Madam President, through you, in response to Senator on the issue of the cost, he finds it a bit exorbitant. But if you encounter some of the hazards that come to our attention at the Ministry of Health, then you will have a better appreciation for the increase from the $250 to the $50,000. Because many people do not have an appreciation of the stress and the health hazards, the health issues that can emanate from their behavior in terms of creating public health hazards. And I believe that this amount is really going to be a deterrent so that people start taking public health hazards seriously. If you look at, for instance, just smoking, people smoke indiscriminately. And I mean smoking anything and everything. I know that lately it is in style to talk about the herb and marijuana. And I don't suppose there's anything wrong with God's plant when you're looking at the plant in itself. But when a human being take anything at all, and put it in the form that they can smoke it. And I can recall, Madam President, we used to, as children, I used to see the kids taking the pashi cocoa, the coconut husk, and wrapping it in a little piece of paper. And especially the boys, they would tend to smoke it and make the smoke go through their nose, just like they would see their parents doing, but they couldn't afford. And, and smoking, it was not a very common thing in my day. But to take something and smoke it, that is where the danger lies. And the second-hand smoke, this is where I'm coming with this bill, the second-hand smoke is even more dangerous to those people who are inhaling it than the smoker himself or herself. So imagine your baby is somewhere, your wife is walking around with your child and so on, and that child is inhaling second-hand smoke that may well, at the end of the day, increase in that child's probability of getting cancer. Do you know how expensive it is to treat a cancer patient? And hopefully it is if they find the cancer early enough for it to be treated. In a lot of cases in St. Lucia, we find it too late and the person is gone. So think of the cost of that human life vis-a-vis a $50,000 charge. And of course, we are going to be doing the education element of it at the Ministry of Health to ensure that everybody is aware of what those charges will pertain to, what type of activity will cause you to incur such a charge. I hope that I have clarified this just a little. That was just one example. I can give you a lot more examples where people do things that impact on people's health and they do not care because it is not really impacting on their health. So it is time that we start to take stock, and I think this legislation is it's just a beginning in terms of taking the stock where our health is concerned. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Public Health Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Public Health Act, Cap 11.01, and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 4.
Insertion of new Section 2A.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 4.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 5.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 7.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 8.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Amendment of Section 9.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 11.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 11.
Amendment of Section 15.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill. Clause 12.
Insertion of new sections 24 and 25.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Public Health Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Public Health Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Public Health Amendment Act 2019.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for the first reading a bill shortly entitled Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition Act.
Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg to move for the second reading a bill shortly entitled Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition Act. The bill for consideration is the Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition Bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to ban the importation, manufacturing, sale, use or distribution of styrofoam and plastic food service containers. Clause 1 of the bill provides for the short title of the bill, and Clause 2 of the bill provides for the interpretation. Clause 3 of the bill binds the Crown. Clause 4 of the bill specifies the materials that are not applicable to this bill. Clause 5 of the bill prohibits the importation of styrofoam and plastic food service containers that are identified in the schedule to the bill. The food service containers specified in Part A of the schedule are not allowed to be imported from the first day of August 2019, and those listed in Part B of the schedule are prohibited from importation from the first day of August 2020. Clause 6 of the bill prohibits the sale, use and distribution of styrofoam and plastic food service containers specified in Part A of the schedule for the first day of August, from the first day of August 2020, and those listed in Part B of the schedule from the first day of August 2021. Similarly, the sale of food in styrofoam and plastic food service containers is prohibited by Clause 7 of the bill. Clause 8 and 9 of the bill make provision for a declaration and reduction measures that must be provided by a food business and gives the power to authorized officers to enter and seize the styrofoam and plastic food service containers. In clauses 10 and 11 of the bill, disposal and the cost of storage and disposal are addressed. The schedule of the bill may be amended in accordance with clause 12 of the bill, and the minister may make regulations under clause 13 of the bill. The schedule identifies the food service containers that are applicable to this bill. The styrofoam and plastic food service containers that are prohibited from the dates specified in clauses 5, 6, and 7 of the bill are listed in Part A and Part B of the schedule.
Senators, the question is that the styrofoam and plastic food service containers bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to ban the importation, manufacturing, sale, use or distribution of styrofoam and plastic food service containers and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Binding of the Crown.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Non-application of this act.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Prohibition on import of styrofoam and plastic food service containers.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Prohibition on manufacture, sale, use, and distribution.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Prohibition of sale of food in styrofoam and plastic food service container.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Declaration and reduction measures.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Power to enter and seize.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Disposal.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 11.
Cost of storage and disposal.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill. Clause 12.
Amendment of schedule.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill. Clause 13.
Regulations.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill. Clause 40. Schedule.
Sections 2, 5, 6, and 7. Food service container.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and the Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Prohibition Act 2019. Honorable
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment.
St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment. The bill for consideration is the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment Bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to amend the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Act, Cap 1605, the Act. Clauses 1 and 2 of the bill provide for the short title and interpretation, respectively. Clause 3 of the bill amends the long title of the Act to replace the reference to Poverty Reduction Fund with the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. By Clause 4 of the bill, the reference to the fund is corrected in the definition of board in Section 2 of the Act. Reference to Poverty Reduction Fund in Section 3.1 of the Act is replaced by St. Lucia Development Fund in Clause 5 of the bill. Clause 6 of the bill amends 16 of the Act to include a new source of revenue for the St. Lucia Development Fund.
Senators, the question is that the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Act, Cap 16.05.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment of long title.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 3.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 16.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Amendment Act 2019.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment.
Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading a bill shortly entitled Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment. The bill for consideration is the Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment Bill, the bill. The purpose of the bill is to amend the Child Care Protection and Adoption Act, number 8 of 2018, the Act. Clause 1 of the bill provides for the short title of the bill. Clause 2 of the bill makes provision for interpretation. In Clause 3 of the bill, Part 5 of the Act, which provides for adoption, is amended to include a new Division 7 to make provision for the making of an adoption order by the High Court. Section 126 of the Act, transitional, is repealed under Clause 4 of the bill.
Senators, the question is that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Henry.
Yes, thank you again, Madam President. Just concern, and I just wish the Leader of Government Business, in presenting this amendment, would use the opportunity to share with us as to what is the state of those who are in our custody, what is happening with the child care protection and adoption activity within the state, what is the experience of the state in the past few years. I know this is a very important piece of legislation, very important piece of legislation, and I have no problems with what is being brought before the Parliament for approval. But the last time came, Madam President, you know, there was a bit of nostalgia for me in terms of the way that we asked the questions, and I for a moment felt that we may have not exhausted all the possible questions as to what is the level of preparedness by the state in actually moving this piece of legislation forward. Are the structures in place? I know that there's some amount of adoption. What exactly is happening? How are the agencies responsible for that? How are they doing at this point in time? Have we seen an improvement based on the handling of the children who are in our care, who are there for care and protection? I know, Madam President, over the years that we have had the issue of mixing children at the Boys Training Center who are there for care and protection with those who are there for serious crime, and it has always been a challenge over the years to keep them separate. When you put together children who are in the hands of the state for care and protection, and they are together with young men who are at the center for other issues, you usually get some sort of a wrong mix, or the influence is not as good, and the outcome sometimes, when you expect the difficult one to be holding back, is influencing the one who's there for care and protection. So I just wanted a sense from the Minister of Health as to what is happening, what improvements we have had, because our children certainly are, we understand our future, and we have quite a bit these days to deal with as it relates to our youth, and we would want the children not graduating quickly into all of what we're experiencing today. Just this question, Madam President.
Senator, your light. Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not sure that the members present would have been able to provide the clarity or some, enlighten me a little bit. Perhaps the Minister for National Security would have been in a better position. However, I'll just mention it so that it could be looked at. Under the Section 11A, 118A, there is a statement there that refers to the infant, description of the infant. It says the infant is a person under 18 years of age, but does not include a person who has been married. Now, I have found that a few of our legislative documents or some of our laws, there's a bit of conflict sometimes that exists, and we need to sometimes try to sort it out because it creates a lot of difficulty for persons in positions that encounter or deal with young people, children, and even students. For example, we have the issue with the age of consent and the age of what we consider an adult. And in school sometimes you have this conflict where a 16-year-old can consent to some adult activities, but in other cases they cannot, they have to be 18. And I think in this case, when you look at the context within which this act is being amended, I'm not sure, and again, there's probably some legal jargon there, that the meaning of infant as somebody under the age of 18 years who has or has not been married. Does that suggest that somebody under 18 in St. Lucia can be married? I'm just, because if it actually speaks of someone who is or has not been married, someone who is 17 or 16, can that person be married? Can that, and then we have the issue of consent versus legal age. I think what I'm really saying is that at some point our laws, our legislation needs to be a little more coherent with the realities. And so that we get situations where there is the juvenile court, for example, has to be dealing with matters that overlap with the criminal court. And schools have to be calling on legal minds to guide on matters that are included in the Education Act, for example. So you have teachers, principals, caregivers, persons who are responsible for young people, for example, in the Boys Training Center, where you have a lot of confusion. I think there are lots of legal minds who may be able to help clarify this. So when we come to the House to make amendments to such legislation, I think we should take into consideration some of those conflicting or overlapping issues that exist in the legislation that we are bringing to the House and in the legislation that existed before. So in making those amendments, I think it would be wise to keep those in mind. That would be my major concern. But in general, I think the Child Protection and Adoption Bill is a very useful move in light of some of the serious concerns that we have as those of us who have been responsible for young people, the kinds of vulnerable situations that they find themselves in. So any bill or act that seeks to protect them is something that I think we as an opposition would welcome. But we just want to make sure that it does not conflict with existing laws, existing legislation, and that when we do the amendments, we keep those things in mind. Thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I more or less want to agree with the Senator in terms of kind of indicating or implying that there are inconsistencies in our legislation as far as childcare and protection is concerned. And this is why we are gradually, earlier this year you saw that we introduced the Child Care Protection and Adoption Bill, and this is an amendment to that bill. So as we move on, we are taking on the different areas that we need to fortify in terms of child care and protection. So I quite agree with you, and there are a number of pieces of legislation that these amendments and new legislation cuts right across. So it is going to take us some time, and I do not know if you're aware that for a while now we have not had a director, I believe it is, of Human Services, because she's retired, the last director we had who was doing such an excellent job. So this amendment really is to allow other agencies to also come in and contribute in terms of speeding up the process when we are looking at child care and protection. So I will not say that this is the end of it. This is, complete. But at least now we have these pieces of legislation, these additional pieces of legislation that provide more protection for children and also for making our adoption process a little less cumbersome. And there is more transparency. There is also more legal aspects there that people have to observe when trying to adopt a child. So I think it is the legislation is a little tighter, but it is easier for a person to go through and get that protection that they are looking for a child.
Senators, the question is that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Child Care Protection and Adoption Act number 8 of 2018.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment of Part 6.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Repeal of Section 126.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendment. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same, as follows. This Act may be cited as the Child Care Protection and Adoption Amendment Act 2019.
Madam Clerk. Senators, we have not had sufficient time to get the Hansard report that we requested earlier, so we will have to deal with it at the next sitting. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned, sine die.
Senators, the question is that this House do stand adjourned, that the Senate do stand adjourned, sine die. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
Thank you for staying with the broadcast. We've just concluded the sitting of Senate. Today, the afternoon session, we saw a number of bills that were read and passed, including the income tax bill, the International Business Companies, the St. Lucia National Economic Fund, Caribbean Treaty on Mutual Legal Assistance in Serious Criminal Matters, Styrofoam and Plastic Food Service Containers Act, St. Lucia Social Development Fund, Child Care Protection and Adoption Act, and the Public Health Act. The Public Health Act was strengthened with the application of stiffer penalties and an increase in the enforcement power of environmental health officers. Additionally, the bill also made provisions for regulations for beauty and wellness, including a spa and massage parlor. Thank you once again so much for tuning in.